sun rises and sets.
Are we doing nude yoga?
Without exception. All flowers and trees grow upwards without exception. You, by your talk of charity and...
Hi, goddess. How are you?
I am okay.
Okay, well, this is a meditation room. I'm about to do a vibration, a very powerful and positive vibration.
Ooh,
I'm
vibrate,
so glad
yeah.
you're here.
Oh, yeah.
My Shekhinah has arrived.
Ooh.
Okay, this is an Aleister Crowley meditation. It's from the Book of Wisdom or Folly. We are on the method of science, de scientia modo. So take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it for 10 seconds. To the mind of the philosopher, therefore, in the youth of an age, any variation in type must appear as a disaster. Yea, verily, intelligence itself must perforce prove its value to the brute in terms of brutishness, or he distrusteth and destroyeth it. Notwithstanding, as thou knowest, that variation which is fitted to his environment is proven the salvation of the species. Only among men his fellows turn ever upon the Saviour and rend him until those who follow him in secret, and it may be unconsciously, prove their virtue and his wisdom by their survival when his persecutors perish in their folly. But we, being secure against all primary enemies to the individual or the commonweal, nay, we must, if we would attain the summit of our race, devote all spare leisure, wealth, and energy to the creation of variation from the norm, and thus by clear knowledge bought of experiment and of experience, move with eyes well open upon our true path. So therefore our law of Thelema is justified also of biology and social science. It is the true way of nature, the right strategy in the war of man with his environment. It is the life of his soul. Okay, this one's for you, goddess. It's called On Monsters, de Monstri.
Okay. I want to tell you really quick something.
Okay, go ahead.
You called me your Shekhinah. I was in Israel once, and when I was there, I told them that was my name. It really freaked them out. That's all. Why did it get so quiet? What happened?
So the whole point of this meditation is to help you create a positive vibration, which is equilibrium and balance and stillness and silence.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm going to put you on mute because I'm creating a recording over here, so I want it to have no background noise. So take the deepest breath of the day. Hold it for 10 seconds. 10, not 11, 10, not 9. Okay, this is Demonstrate on Monsters. Sayest thou, O my son, that not thus, but by forced training, one cometh to perfection? This indeed is sooth, that by artificial selection, and well-watched growth and environment, one hath dogs, horses, pigeons, and the like, which excel their forebears in strength and beauty and speed as one will. Yet is this work but a false magical artifice, temporary and illusion. For the masterpieces are but monsters, not true variations. And if thou leave them, they revert swiftly to their own proper and authentic type, because that type was made fit by experience to its environment. So therefore, every variation must be left free to perpetuate itself or to perish, not cherished for its beauty, or guarded for its appeal to thine ideal, not cut off in thy fear thereof. For the proof of its virtue lieth in the manifestation of its power to survive, amen, to reproduce itself after its kind. Nurse not the weakness of any man, nor swaddle and corset him, nay, not though he were poet or artist, because of his value to thy fancy. For if thou do this, he shall increase in his infirmity, so that even his work, for which thou lovest him, shall be enfeebled also. Okay, this next one is called On the Hidden Palace of Wisdom. And Goddess, I would love for you to subscribe to my YouTube podcast. I'll pin the link. So let me read this one and then we'll chat about it. It's called On the Hidden Palace of Wisdom. De Inferno Palacio Sapientiae. Now then thou seest that this hell, or concealed place within thee, is no more a fear or hindrance to men of a free race, but the treasure house of the assimilated wisdom of the ages and the knowledge of the true way. Thus are we just and wise to discover the secret in ourselves and conform the conscious mind therewith, for that mind is compact solely until it be illuminated of impressions and judgments, so that its will is but directed by the sum of the shallow reactions of a most limited experience. But thy true will is the wisdom of the ages of thy generations, the expression of that which hath fitted thee to thine environment. Thus thy conscious mind is oftentimes foolish, is when thou admirest an ideal and wouldst attain it, but thy true will letteth thee so that there is conflict. And the humiliation of that mind, here will I call to witness the common event of good resolutions that defy the lightning of destiny, being puffed up by the wind of an indigestible ideal putrefying within thee. Thence cometh colic, and presently the poison is expelled, or else thou diest. But resolutions of true will are mighty against circumstance. So it comes down to will. So when you are doing the naked yoga dance and raising, your kundalini, or observers or experiences kundalini, that is essentially activating the true will. But as an American, your true will is essentially in alignment with your Constitution, because the Constitution is essentially the scope or the charter, the framework of the beginning of that, political party, which is liberty, justice, and freedom for all. So, but the point is America and China technically have the same understanding of freedom and liberty. So it's really just a question of an index of vulgarity.
It's all in the false light, in my opinion. This echoes too much. It's all false light. The only will is the will of God. The only love is the love of God. And that's what true love and true will really are. It's in alignment with the universe, aka God. It doesn't have anything to do with any religions that force us or ask us or pressure us to believe. I'm technically in alignment with Al-Dajjal, according to the Islamic people, because I am a non-believer. There's nothing to believe in. God does not want you to freaking believe in them. You know, like,
well,
God doesn't care if you don't believe.
Well, see, the thing is, the founding fathers were Freemasons, and Freemasons essentially believe in love. So, I mean, it's all the whole world operates off of love, but I think we just
no, desire.
well, love is like a red heart, desire is a red color, but the point is, wisdom is supposedly love. So, love of law is the domination of the wise. That's wisdom. I'm just saying that I don't disagree with anything you said, except the fact that maybe you don't like the fact that I could point to the Constitution as being an all or nothing document. It is an all or nothing document.
The Constitution is really good, but I heard that there was a punctuation error in regard to the statement about the pursuit of happiness.
Well,
it's really interesting.
If you read it, very slowly, and you just actually pick apart individual words and focus on those individual words, that is essentially, the more like advanced level, because what you're doing is expanding the document. It would be pretty interesting to put it through like an expansion tool on ChatGPT to essentially create more content off of it to help people get an expansion or more relative, positions to it, because so much of that document is transcendental. So it deals with, divine illumination, poetic words of joy. It's a document for success. So I don't know, to say that it's not something to contemplate. I mean, I just, if you have one
to contemplate, I think everything is worth contemplation.
Well, it's just the ageless wisdom. So the Freemasons are just obsessed with ageless wisdom philosophy, which in many ways is anti-pope and anti-Anglican church. It's its own thing. So it is like a gang. Every gang has their charter or their scope of work. So if you look at who founded this country, it was Freemasons. And, I mean, I have many books on it, and I'm not a member of Freemasonry. I'm just saying that when I read that, I see how it's a very advanced philosophy that creates a strong differentiation from other world philosophies like the Catholic Church or the British King and the Anglican Church. I mean, Protestantism is really, I would say, pretty tightly wrapped into Freemasonry. That's my opinion. I'm trying to categorize and organize how I view history and current groups, and maybe what documents that they subscribe to or claim that they subscribe to. Because I think a lot of people just don't read anything anymore. So whatever organizations have, it doesn't even mean anything to them. It's
It's a horrible thought to think that people do not read anything anymore.
I know this girl that I went to Israel with. I was like, when was the last time you read a book? She's like, probably 2005. And she's 47, 45. I'm like, you haven't read a book in 20 years? She's like, nope. I was like, oh my gosh. To me, it's like sacred chanting. I'm trying to focus.
People are still writing books. They're still writing them.
When I chant sacred texts, I'm trying to essentially dehypnotize myself from listening to all the bullshit on this app and other platforms by going way back and using these texts to MK Ultra myself. I use beer and orange juice, coffee, red wine, and cannabis, and yoga, and the gym. But I have definitely been capturing and recording myself reading these books for quite a while now. And there's just a lot of words. This book, Wisdom or Folly, is very interesting because it capitalizes a lot of proper nouns that we do not normally capitalize, like the word that.
Yeah.
That is capitalized. Like, there's just so many capitalized words where you're just like,
I don't
okay.
even know why I come on this app anymore. I erased it from my phone a while ago, and I put it back on a few days ago. But I'm making more YouTube videos because personally, I think that what I have to say and my inspiration is more worthwhile than the people who argue about the color of people's skin and what the Bible says on this fucking app.
Well, see, I
Yeah.
bootleg this app. I will cross stream and re-platform everybody on this app. And so what I title my new rooms now are low IQ dumb people talking about nothing, wasting time. Those are like the new room titles that I've been using.
I noticed that, but look how many people come into your rooms.
Today was good. I had a lot of regulars in the morning.
That's good, but how much time have you spent on this app?
Like 5 years now.
That's way too much time.
It feels like 5 years. I don't know, because I remember I started using it right in the beginning, March 2020, somewhere right around there. So yeah, it's getting on close to 5 years. But I have created thousands upon thousands. I mean, I have like 15,000 videos from this app. But
that's great. This app has inspired me to turn it off and then go off of the topics from what I wanted to say to some people that won't let me speak, and then just speak on my YouTube channel and make a nice video. And I just need to do that more regularly, I think, because that's kind of like a step to getting on the TEDx stage and actually speaking my mind and sharing my life experience and my insight. And personally, I was Aleister Crowley in past life, probably, according to some of my friends. And so I would think that maybe not going back to my old tests where I was like talking about doing heroin and cocaine, maybe like go a little bit further than that.
Well, these substances, I think you have to mix them with the documentation. I mean, if you're not trying, the whole thing is those substances like girder your soul or loosen up and provide a lubricant. But when you mix it with the information, there can be lasting effect, because there really is no point, in abusing your body. If you can live a perfect life, you have total sobriety, and you're one with the environment. So I think if you're going to try to essentially do reprogramming for yourself or others, it's easier to do it on substances. Performers, anybody, if you look at all the history of music and everything, I mean, a lot of drug usage. So there's a belief, that you need it, but you really don't. The problem is, I think it just takes away a lot of the fear, or it creates a flow state.
Substances for therapy, but not for your life. It's just therapy.
I know, but you have to compare it to the fact that people are taking all these psychiatrics, like SSRIs and Borean.
Yeah, but they're not taking them as therapy. They're being lied to that they need to stabilize themselves, and it's something that will help them stabilize.
Bupropion. Yeah. Basically, these psychiatric names are like mantras. Like, I should get a list of all this top psychiatric medications and create a mantra about it.
Yeah.
No, it's not yuck, because what you're trying to do is dehypnotize people with words, and many people are hypnotized to prescription names and brand names.
The basic stuff, like the word apocalypse. If you can get through to people that the basic Greek meaning of the word apocalypse is to take the cover off of something, then you'll get somewhere with them. Like all the stuff that Hollywood is lying to us about, trying to scare us about, all of the ideas about power that people have gotten memed all to their eyeballs in. They're memed up to their eyeballs in absolute power, absolutely corrupt. And, great power requires great responsibility. I don't want to be responsible. I don't want power. People are like trained to throw their power away. Oh yeah, and words are powerful. All that bullshit that people just throw away their power to. It's automatically just throw away your will, throw away your power. Oh yeah, words are powerful. No, you know what's more powerful than words? Choice. Because people invest in words emotionally, and then they get all bent out of shape because they have an emotional investment and are associating it to something. It's like, You say like the word discrimination, and people pee their pants. You know, they pee their pants. Scared of it. You use like right discrimination, or using sensible discrimination. Things need to be contextualized, and people don't understand that. It's like, how do you even? You can't lead it. You can't make a horse drink the water you lead it to. You know that. It's just like. The only thing that I think that I should do is just share, and I just need to take my time now and just go on YouTube, because I have a speech that needs to come out that's being wasted on this app. If I share my mental power on here, I'm throwing it right into the void.
Well, if I could give you any advice, I think that reciting sacred texts and vibrating pre-existing documents is a much easier way to go about, just doing anything on the internet. You could use ChatGPT to create really cool things and vibrate and chat those as well. I mean, there's so many. You could create so much awesome stuff with ChatGPT to vibrate into YouTube for positive vibrations.
Yeah, but I'm actually a certified yoga instructor, so I also have access to a community that has 5,000 people in it in real life. And so I can actually get them together for sexual kung fu classes. I can get them together for naked yoga. I can get them together for talking about like the value of giving energy at sex parties instead of just looking for somebody to hook up to, and see how much further it will get them at the sex party. It's like I go to these parties and there's a bunch of sad ass bastards that go there, obviously. And
What
they
about
don't
what do you think
get any
about
play.
what do you think about hosting online chat sex parties?
That's interesting.
I mean,
think
why can't we
I have
host
like
online sex why can't we host online sex chats on here on Clubhouse? Like that would be ultimate maximum freedom of speech. I mean, we can the whole thing is it's like it's gonna be funny because people are gonna be doing, faking all kinds. I mean, it's just sound effects.
Yeah.
It's just fucking sound
Well, I
effects.
mean, have you been on Threads yet?
Yeah.
There are women on there who pretend that they're like masturbating and having orgasms when they're probably squishing around some pasta or something like that, and going
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you can go on YouTube and type in sex ASMR, sex whisper ASMR, like dirty talk whisper ASMR. They're
Oh
really
yeah, I accidentally discovered how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll pop. Like there's a few ladies that are doing that with ASMR. That's pretty funny.
I was playing orgasm sounds on this app under my legal under my legal name, and somebody clipped me and posted it on YouTube. It was like a terrible dox.
They doxed you.
Yeah, this let me play for you. Tell me how it feels to listen to this on Clubhouse. Oh,
Oh God. Okay.
Yeah.
Goddess, why don't you create a room and just call it moaning sounds and let will you why don't you create it? Oh, wait, never mind. Let me just mod you. And then we're gonna change the title of the room to Goddess Moaning Sounds. Keep your mic open, but don't say anything. Goddess.
Yeah, I'll just moan.
No. You don't even have to do it. This is fully automated.
All right.
But
Yeah,
just
okay.
go with it for 3 minutes. We'll see who shows up. And
All right, let's try it.
this is our bait and switch. We'll see.
Let's experiment.
Make sure you invite people. Hit the share button and invite people.
Oh, yeah.
These are much better. This is called What an Orgasm Feels Like by Ava Swift. 3 million views released 3 years ago. Sped up to 1.25. I'm gonna recreate some Valentine's Day rooms. Yeah, okay, go ahead, goddess. Give us your best moaning session.
Oh, yeah. I can't. I'm laughing too hard. Oh, yeah. I can't do it when I'm on the spot. It's too funny. We have one person. Robert, come with us. Oh, yeah.
Okay, that was fun. The goddess has left us. Let us return to the Tao.
If you're happy and you don't clap your hands.
Welcome to the second edition of the Alan Watts podcast, Being in the Way, and I'm your host, Mark Watts. Today, we're going to hear part 3 of Taoist Way of Dropping Out from Karma. And also we're going to hear a talk called The Wisdom of the Ridiculous, which comes from the Lao Tzu tradition expressed in the Tao Te Ching. Recently, I've had a few conversations with people that would like to know more about my father's background and are having a hard time reconciling his worldview with the other philosophies that they know about. So I thought I'd do a little bit of storytelling. Talk a little bit about my father's early life today. And then in the next episode, we'll talk about when he was traveling a lot and making a lot of recordings and how that morphed into the Electronic University Project, the predecessor to the Alan Watts organization. So we'll start off with his early life in London, what he learned at the Buddhist Lodge, and his migration to America.
When I was a small boy, I used to haunt that section of London around the British Museum. And one day I came across a shop which had a notice over the window which said philosophical instruments. Even as a boy, I knew something about philosophy, but I couldn't imagine what philosophical instruments could be. So I went up to the window, and there displayed were chronometers, slide rules, scales, and all kinds of what we would now call scientific instruments. Because science used to be called natural philosophy. Because, as Aristotle says, the beginning of philosophy is wonder. Philosophy is man's expression of curiosity about everything, his attempt to make sense of the world primarily through his intellect. That is to say, his faculty for thinking. And thinking, of course, is a word used in extremely many ways, and is a very vague word for most people. But I use the word thinking, now and hereafter, you must understand this, in a very precise way. By thinking, as distinct from feeling or emoting or sensing, I mean the manipulation of symbols, whether they be words, whether they be numbers, or whether they be other such signs as, say, triangles, squares, circles, astrological signs, or whatever. These are symbols. But all these things are symbols, and the manipulation of symbols to represent events going on in the real world is what I call thinking. I suppose most of you have heard of Zen. But before going on to explain any details about it, I want to make one thing absolutely clear. I am not a Zen Buddhist. I am not advocating Zen Buddhism. I'm not trying to convert anyone to it. I have nothing to sell. I'm an entertainer. That is to say, in the same sense that when you go to a concert and you listen to someone play Mozart, he has nothing to sell except the sound of the music. He doesn't want to convert you to anything. He doesn't want you to join an organization in favor of Mozart's music as opposed to, say, Beethoven's. And I approach you in the same spirit as a musician with his piano or violinist with his violin. I just want you to enjoy a point of view which I enjoy.
As a young man, my father was very
3 reasons you need to start dating on Bumble. Number 1, women message first. That's empower.
So you and I have all
Bumble advertising. That's the B. This is my recreation on Clubhouse.
conspired with ourselves to pretend that we are not really God. Of course we are, that's perfectly obvious. We're all apertures through which the universe is looking at itself. Only it is so arranged that we don't know that in exactly the same way as we don't look directly at our own eyes.
Welcome to Being in the Way, the Alan Watts podcast, and I'm your host, Mark Watts. And today we're going to hear a talk that was recorded in 1972 on December 13th at the New College of Sausalito. The title is Landscape, Soundscape in Painting, Music, and Mystical Vision. It's a delightful look at the arts, aesthetics, and Buddhist and Taoist philosophy. So here's Alan Watts at the New College in Landscape, Soundscape in Painting, Music, and Mystical Vision.
Now let me see. This was announced as landscape, soundscape in painting, music, and mystical vision. That was what it was to be about.
That was the latter part.
Now, you realize that for perhaps thousands of years, the art of painting and the art of sculpture were iconographic. That is to say, they served mainly religious purposes. There was no such thing as what we now call fine art. All art was functional and made objects to serve supports for contemplation or for ritual or magical purposes. And so if you go to a museum of any kind of ancient art, almost everything that you will see will be something of religious or magical function. And these consist principally of effigies of human or divine animal figures. In painting, of course, you cannot see a figure without a background.
Okay, this is called On the Defects of the Hidden Will. De Vitis Voluntatis Secretae. Learn more ever concerning this hell or hidden wisdom that is within thee, that it is modified little by little through the experience of the conscious mind, which feedeth it, for that wisdom is the expression, or rather symbol and hieroglyph of the true adjustment of thy being to its environment. Now then, that environment being eroded by time, this wisdom is no more perfect, for it is not absolute, but standeth in relation to the universe, so then a part thereof may become void of use and atrophy, as I will instance this case. Man's wit of smell and the bodily organ corresponding degenerateth therewith, but this is an effect of much time, so that in thine hell thou art like to find elements vain or foolish, or contrary to thy present will. Yet, O my son, this hidden wisdom is not thy true will, but only the levers, I may say, thereof. Notwithstanding, there lieth therein a faculty of balance, whereby it is able to judge whether any element in itself is presently useful and benign, or else idle and malignant. Here then is a root of conflict between the conscious and the unconscious. Here is a debate concerning the right order of conduct, how the will may be accomplished. Unreason, the minister of the will, de ratione presidio voluntatis. My son, in this case, is there darkness, yet this comfort is a lamp therein, that there is no error in the will, but only doubt as to the means of success. Else were we as children afeard of night. Thus we have need not but to consider the matter by wit of reason, and of prudence, and of common sense, and of experience, and of science, adjusting ourselves so far as we may. Here is the key of success, and its name is the skill to make right use of circumstance. This then is the virtue of the mind, to be the wazzer of the will, a true counselor through intelligence of the universe. But, O my son, do thou lay this word beneath thine heart, that the mind hath no will nor right thereto, so that usurpation bringeth forth a fatal conflict in thyself. For the mind is sensitive, unstable as air, and may be led foolishly in leash by a stronger mind that worketh as the cunning tool of a will. Therefore thy safety and defense is to hold thy mind to his right function, a faithful minister to thine own true will, that is king of that star whose name is thyself. By election of nature, heed well this, O my son, for thy mind passive is rightly a mirror to reflect all things clearly without prejudice, and to remain unstained by them. On the way of wisdom, de cursus sapientis. Therefore consider this again in a figure, that thy mind is as the marshal of an army, to observe the dispositions of the enemy, and to order his own forces rightly, according to that information, but he hath no will, only obedience to the word of his king, to outwit and to overcome the opposite. Nor doth that king make war by his own whim, if he be wise and true, but solely because of the necessity of his country and its nature, whereof he is but executive officer and interpreter. Its voice as the marshal is its arm. Thus then do thou understand thyself, not giving place to thy mind to dispute thy will, nor through ignorance and carelessness allowing the enemy to deceive thee, nor by fear, by imprudence and foolhardiness, by hesitation and vacillation, by disorder and the lack of firm correctness, by failure in elasticity or in obstinacy, each at its moment, suffering defeat in the hour of shock. So then, O my son, this is thy work, to know the word of the will without error, and to make perfect every faculty of thy mind in right order and readiness to impose that word as law upon the universe, so mote it be. Unreason, source of madness, when not under will. De ratione quae sine voluntate est fons maniae. Is it not a marvel how he that worketh with his will and is in constant touch with the reality external maketh his mind to serve him? How eagerly runneth it and returneth, gathering, arranging, clarifying, classifying, organizing, comparing, setting in array, with skill and might and energy that faileth never. Nay, my son, in this way thou canst be pitiless with thy mind, and it will not rebel against thee, or neglect thine ordinance, but now consider him that worketh not with his will, how his mind is idle, not reaching out after reality, but debating within itself of its own affairs like a democracy introspective. Then this mind, not reflecting, not reacting equably and with elasticity to the world, is lost in its own anarchy and civil war, so that although it work not, it is overcome by weakness of division and becometh Coronzon. And unto these words I call to my witness the madness of the soul of Muscovy in this year X333, 13 of our eon that is ended. Therefore behold how this our law of Thelema, do what thou wilt, is the first foundation of health, whether in the body or the mind, either of a simple or a complex organism. And truth which may not be told to a woman, de veritate quam feminae non dicere licet. My son, I charge thee, howsoever thou beest provoked thereunto, tell not the truth to any woman, for this is that which is written, cast not thy pearls before swine, lest they turn again and rend thee. Behold, in the nature of woman is no truth, nor apprehension of truth, nor possibility of truth, only if thou entrust this jewel unto them, they forthwith use it to thy loss and destruction. But they are aware of thine own love of truth, and thy respect thereunto, so therefore they tempt thee, flattering with their lips, that thou betray thyself to them. And they feign falsely with every wile, cast about for thy soul, until either in love, or in wrath, or in some other folly thereof thou speak truth, profaning thy sanctuary. So was it ever, and herein I call to my witness Samson of Timnath, that was lost by this error. Now for any woman any lie sufficeth, and think not in thine extremity. The truth is mighty, and shall prevail as it doth with any man. For with a woman her whole craft and device is to persuade thee of this, so that thou utter the secret of thy soul and become her prey. But so long as thou feed her with her own food of falsity, thou art secure. Oh, let's call that truth which may not be told to a woman. On the nature of woman, de natura feminae. The nature of woman, O my son, is as thou hast learned in our most holy Kabbalah. She is the clothing and sex of man, the magical image of his will to love. Therefore was it said by thine uncle Wolfgang van Goethe, Das ewig weiblich zieht uns hinan. But therefore also hath she no nature of truth, because she is but the eidolon of an excitement, and of a going of thy star, and appertaineth not unto its essence and stability. So then to thee she is but matter, and to her thou art but energy, and neither is competent to the formula of the other. Therefore also as thy will is itself imperfection, as I have showed thee aforetime, thou art not in the way of love, except thou be dressed in that robe of thine which thou callest woman. and thou canst not lure her to this action proper to her by thy truth. But thou shalt, as our grammar saith, assume the mask of the spirit, that thou mayst evoke it by sympathy. But thou shalt appear in thy glory only when she is in thy power, and bewildered utterly by ecstasy. This is a mystery, O my son, and of old time it was declared in the fable of Scylla and Charybdis, which are the formula of the rock and the whirlpool. Now then meditate thou strictly upon this most worthy and most adorable arcanum to thy profit and enlightenment. On the two rewards of the path, de duobus premis viae. Let it be a treasure in thine heart, O my son, this mystery that I shall next unveil before thine eyes, O eagle, that thou art undazzled by the brilliance of light that soarest continually with virile flight to thine august inheritance. Behold, the beatific vision is of two orders, and in the formula of the rosy cross it is of the heart and is called beauty, but in the formula of the silver star, Edest of the eye within the triangle, it is of the mind, and it is called wonder. Otherwise spoken, the former is of art, a sensuous and creative perception, but the latter of science, an intellectual and intelligible insight, or again in our holy Kabbalah. The one is of Tiferet, the other of Binah, and in pure philosophy. This is a contemplation of the cosmos, causal, dynamic, and that of its effect in static presentation. Now this rapture of art is a virtue or triumph of love in his most universal comprehension, but the ecstasy of science is a continual orgasm of light that is of the mind. Thou sayest, O my father, how I may attain to this fullness and perfection. Art thou here, O my son? It is well, and blessed be the bed wherein thou wast begotten, and the womb of thy sweet mother, Hilarion, my concubine, holy and adulterous, the scarlet woman. Amen.
And as a matter of fact, that's also true of sculpture, but we consider the background in sculpture irrelevant because it is not something which the artist himself has created. It's the temple or museum or place in which it is shown. But when you paint, and especially when you paint on a rectangular surface, instead of a surface that is shaped along with the figure, so that the outline of the figure is also the frame, when you paint, you have to put in some kind of a background. Now, if you've seen Greek or Russian icons, the background is solid gold, often emblazoned with jewels. But as time went on, painters began to put landscape in the background, because that's the way you see people. They must be against something. And in due course, Western painters began to be fascinated with the background. And they said to the figure, move over. And then there were landscapes. But of course, the people who looked at them and weren't used to this kind of thing said, well, that's not what I call a painting. But in time, they got used to it. So used to it that, in fact, in every national park, you will find a place called Inspiration Point, where there's a great view. Everybody wants a room with a view. And when all the tourists from Kansas and Iowa get there, they say, oh, it's just like a picture. There's a very mysterious thing that's happening here. What was it that intrigued painters about mountains, trees, clouds, and rivers? Why did they feel they were beautiful? Why suddenly did they get this vision that these were things that were worth copying? Now, painters were falling in love with the non-symmetrical. Now, the human form, although wiggly, is more or less symmetrical. We look as if we've been folded down the middle because we have an eye on either side, 2 ears. Some of us part our hair in the middle. And there were 2 arms, 2 legs, although we're not symmetrical inside. 2 testicles, 2 breasts, or whatever you may be equipped with. But you do look pretty symmetrical. But clouds don't. Then there's another thing. We worry about our behavior a great deal. And we talk about good behavior and bad behavior, sane behavior and crazy behavior, and artificial behavior and natural behavior. And we are into a big thing about this. But the painter doesn't worry about the behavior of clouds or of spraying water or rocks. It would be unimaginable to accuse a wave of making an aesthetic mistake. Nobody has ever, I think, in history, drawn an objection to a badly formed cloud. And only once in history was there a complaint about the stars. And this was a Frenchman in the 18th century who criticized the good Lord for not arranging the stars in fine geometrical patterns that would be edifying to the intellect, but had instead scattered them at random across the sky. That was the period when people were making formal gardens, were making tulips form 4s, and were clipping trees and hedges in very formal topiary work, so that trees looked like birds and sundials and all sorts of things. And the garden was laid out in squares. And this is a very curious thing, because we still tend to do that to some extent. When you fly across the United States from San Francisco to New York, you encounter first a long stretch of mountain country where human beings must perforce accord with nature, except in some parts of Nevada and Utah. But by and large, all our roads are curly because they have to go along mountain valleys. There are curly rivers and wonderful washes, which interestingly enough are in the form of trees. The river and the tree are the same shape. So it's really fascinating. I mean, they go different directions. The tree goes up and the river goes down. But actually, a tree flows up because there's a flow of sap. And the flow of liquid is the flow of life. If you study water flow, you get what is really basic to nature. There's a marvelous book about this by Theodor Schwenk, and it's called Sensitive Chaos, and it's published by the Rudolf Steiner House in London. And it is a series of photographs with commentary of the way in which water flows under all sorts of conditions. And then it goes on that to patterns of fire, which are essentially the same, but flowing up. And then to patterns of the grain in wood, which are, as it were, a sculpture memorializing the flow of water. And then to patterns of bones, of muscle, and finally to human painting, abstract painting, in particular the painting of the arabesque and Celtic illumination, where everything is based on the patterns of the flow of water.
How about the flow of blood?
Blood is basically water, a little thicker. I mean, after all, you are 90% water, and that is really miraculous.
Speaking of the life of the thing.
Yes, but it's the water, it is the gravitational flow of water that is the life in us all. Energy is gravity, and that is the real meaning of E equals mc squared. So Lao Tzu, writing a little before 400 BC, pointed out that the course of nature, the Tao, is like water, in that although being extremely soft, it overcomes all hard things, and in being weak is extremely strong, and that it always seeks the lowest level which men abhor. And especially in our culture, to go with nature, to take the line of least resistance, is considered unmanly, weak-kneed, spineless, and altogether wrong. And we are all brought up to be energetic. That is to say, to use force. And then if anyone who isn't using force, say in school, is reported on by the teachers as lacking aggression and not being upstanding. This is really very weird. And I adjure you, in thinking about human affairs, always call common sense in question. It is the most creative path in philosophy. Take ideas which are commonly accepted and which seem to be incontrovertible and question them. Turn them backwards and see what would happen if they were thought about the other way. I'll give you an example. Everybody automatically assumes that the present is the result of the past. Turn it round and consider whether the past may not be the result of the present. Whether the past may not be streaming back from now, like contrail of a plane. And then if you look at it that way, it all makes sense. Only you see that just as the tail doesn't wag the dog, the past doesn't cause the present, unless you insist that it does. And then, then that's your trip. But actually, the whole universe emerges from the present right now. It's all beginning now. We are present at this moment, at the beginning of creation. And the past is echoes going back, echoes in the corridors of your mind. And the past is in fact present. That is to say, in terms of monuments that survive now, in terms of memories that survive now, and so on, books, other records. Because you see, the universe is a vibration. Although it seems to us to be still, and something like a rock, like Mount Tamalpais, has been around for a long time, but we are not normally aware of the fact that Tamalpais is an extremely fast vibration. So fast that we can't see the intervals between the vibrations, because the retina retains impressions in such a way that when you see a light going at 60 cycles, you can't see the intervals between the cycles, the on-off. But you can with an arc light. And when you listen to an extremely deep sound, you can hear the rattle in it. When you get down to you can hear the rattle. You can hear it going on and off, on and off, on and off. But if it goes very fast, you get up to you can't hear it. But actually, everything is going on and off. It's going because it's an electronic performance. And so the world is coming at you like a movie. And it's all coming out of space. See, the stars vibrate out of space. If there weren't any space, there couldn't be any stars. Couldn't be any galaxy. And so it is, something is now coming out of nothing, because nothing is perfectly obviously the root of something. You can't have something without nothing, just as you can't have a baby without a womb. So there is a hollow. And the hollow, as Lao Tzu points out, is the origin of the solid. Or in a way you might say they come into being together. Lao Tzu says, to be and not to be arise mutually. And that's the basis of the I Ching, the Book of Changes. The Yang principle and the Yin principle create each other because they are likened to the south and north sides of a mountain. The south side in the sun, the north in the shade. And perfectly obviously, you can't have a mountain with one side only. Although human beings who do not perceive this principle are always trying to have the Yang without the Yin. They want the light without the dark, the good without the bad, the pleasurable without the painful, the something without the nothing, the life without the death. And this is, of course, profoundly illogical. So then, all this yang yinning has, however, in it, pattern. And this pattern is revealed basically in the flow of water and how it behaves. And this is, I think, why artists copied it. Because in water it is shown that the Tao, or the course of nature, never makes an aesthetic mistake. The fellow, of course, who complained to God that the stars were badly arranged, didn't have a correct view of the galaxy. We are in the galaxy, and close by, it does indeed look as if the stars were just randomly scattered. But if you go away to a tremendous distance, you will see that this galaxy is beautifully formed as a double helix. And we can see that with many other distant galaxies, although they have varying shapes. Lots of them are these magnificent double helixes. This pattern, as when you clasp your hands together, and you see that that is the same basic pattern as that of sexual intercourse. In other words, the one node is chasing the other. And they're going, in a spiral, chasing after each other. And the one node doesn't know itself, except in terms of the other one. And you would not be aware of the sensation of self, unless at the same time you were aware of the sensation of something other. Now that's very interesting. If you can't have self without other, or yang without yin, or front without back, or the knowledge of voluntary action without the experience of what involuntarily happens, then it indicates that there's a conspiracy going on. In other words, these two are different, but esoterically and secretly the same. Only when you know that, you have a problem. This is why one could say that being enlightened, in the Buddhist sense of the word, is a sort of calamity. Because you found out the ruse which you were playing on yourself. You found out that the universe is a system which creeps up on itself and says, boo, and then laughs at itself for jumping. In other words, it is a self-surprising arrangement, so as to avoid the monotony and boredom of knowing everything in advance. So you and I have all conspired with ourselves to pretend that we are not really God. Of course we are, that's perfectly obvious. We are all apertures through which the universe is looking at itself. Only it is so arranged that we don't know that in exactly the same way as we don't look directly at our own eyes. We don't hear our hearing, and so on. There's always a blind spot. Take your head, for example. It's marvelously invisible. You can't even see it in the form of a black blob in the middle of everything. It isn't black. It isn't even fuzzy. It's just plain not there from the standpoint of sight. And yet out of that emptiness you see, just as the stars shine out of the emptiness of space. All right, now, I want to go back to the watercourse character of the formations that emerge in space. They all wiggle, just as the roads wiggle until you get to Denver. But after Denver, where the country is flat, and the people likewise to some extent, everything goes straight. Everything is rectangles. Everything is Euclidean. Everything is straightened out, squared away. And so we have a kind of a passion, a compulsion to straighten things out. And say, let's get this straightened out. Why? I would say, wouldn't it be more fun not to have it straightened out, but rather to be made curvaceous? But it says on the road, dangerous curves. And somehow that's dangerous. Women have dangerous curves. And for that reason, attractive. I mean, they did for a time try to straighten women out. We may, if you look at photographs of fashions in the 1920s, well, they flattened their breasts and wore dresses that went clunk and hats that went boom, you know, and they became straight women. And it was a terrible era. And people we call straights or squares, you see, are of this mentality. They don't wiggle. Or let's say they don't swing. For example, the fundamental movement of dancing is where the hips can move independently of the shoulders. Say the shoulders remain still and the hips wiggle. Well, a lot of people think that's obscene and won't do it. Men in England wouldn't dream of making a motion like that because it would be improper. I mean, old boy, you've got to keep a stiff upper lip and do the jolly old thing, but don't behave like a hula dancer. But when you watch Hindu dancing, you see, their arms, too, are going in that rhythm. And they look as if they were in water, like water plants moving in a current. And lots of us think that that is extremely beautiful. Really wiggly human behavior. It still gets us back to water. It still gets us back to what it is that fascinates artists about landscape. Well, now, then there was an evolution beyond this point in the history of art. The artists got together and said, why do we have to copy what clouds and trees and water are doing? Why can't we do it ourselves? Why don't we create works of nature? And so they did. They experimented with people like Jackson Pollock in dripping paint on canvas. actually letting this watercourse thing happen without copying anything. Gordon Onslow Ford, who's a local painter, has been doing that for years. Only a slightly different technique, but essentially the same thing. All kinds of painters, they say. Mark Tobey, he looked at Chinese writing in the cursive style, where Chinese writing is a flow of the brush, and when you do it fast, in longhand, as distinct from print, what they call in Japan gyosho, you get these amazing rivers dancing on paper. And Mark Tobey saw that and introduced white writing and did the most marvelous paintings. But he discovered that you had to be in a certain state in order to achieve this, because there was something fundamentally different between fine abstract painting and mere mess. Now, a lot of people thought, oh, any child could do that. And so they set out to make abstract paintings, which nobody was interested in. They were just terrible. And some people took typewriters and hit them several times with a sledgehammer and then mounted them on a cubic block of walnut and said Opus 14, you know? And this is completely phony. But other people, for no explainable reason, nobody could possibly figure it out, but it was obvious that Mark Tobey was not a phony. But it's impossible to explain why. Just in the same way as it is impossible to explain why the patterns in water and clouds and mountains are beautiful. Now, you get courses in aesthetics where somebody takes a landscape and draws a lot of triangles all over it and says, you see, the reason why this is a good landscape is that it holds your eye in a certain pattern. And you go from here to here to here to here, and that's satisfactory. This is just geometry. This is absolute foolishness. Nobody knows and cannot possibly say why a mountain is beautiful. In art school, where they try to teach one to do beautiful things, they all eventually find it's perfectly unteachable. And if it were teachable, it would be terrible. Because thousands of Rembrandts and Leonardos and Picassos would be emerging from art school. And everybody would say, oh, it's this old hat. Why not? Let's have something new. Or same way in music school. You can't teach music. What you can teach is how to play an instrument, how to read notations, and things, the technical things like that. But you cannot really teach what to do with the instrument, what notes to write. You can copy the old masters, but you're still just copying. When Bach wrote music, he really invented the laws of harmony. And everybody studies Bach to find out what the laws of harmony are. It's like language comes long before grammar. Eventually, grammarians, a child doesn't learn grammar before it learns English. The child picks up the language by ear. And then afterwards goes to school and is amazed and horrified to discover that this language has grammar. And lots of languages in the world, lots of peoples, didn't know they had grammar until anthropologists told them and discovered the rules of their so-called primitive languages. So the artist doesn't really know what constitutes beauty. And he doesn't know this for exactly the same reason that you and I cannot see our own heads and do not know how our brains work. Even the greatest neurologists don't know how the brain works, and they're the first people to admit it. They don't know how they manage to be conscious. They don't know how they make decisions. It just happens. In the same way as you can move your fingers without knowing any physiology. You just do it. So in the same way, the artist manages to create the beautiful. So therefore, one may suppose that when spontaneous painting has become really understood by the great masses, that people will walk down city streets and there will be a filthy old brick wall somewhere covered with scraps of torn off posters and bird droppings and scratches. And they'll stop and look and say, oh, it's just like a picture. Because the artist, you see, has the function of teaching one to see. Now then, let's look at it in music. Western music, we'll discuss first. We're not really going into the Orient yet. Was very formal. I mean, look at a Western concert. What a ritual it is. You know, all these ladies and gentlemen wearing black clothes, sitting in a great semicircle, and then the conductor arrives, and there's a tremendous hullabaloo, and bows and motions to the orchestra, and then suddenly he was ready to go, see? And then this thing starts up. Well, first of all, it's on a regular beat. Say it's 4/4 time, 6/8 time, or whatever it may be. But it's all basically on a regular beat. And so to Oriental ears, it sounds like a military march, even if it be sentimental in melodic form. But everything is 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and 4, over to the window and back to the door. See, it's all that. And very serious. You don't see orchestra members laughing at each other, as you do, say, in a Hindu orchestra. Very serious. They're up there, and they are doing the thing. That's what you're supposed to listen to. See? That's the object going on. And so, likewise, they want to suppress, and as far as possible, all other sounds. The audience must be silent. They don't want coughing, blowing noses, shuffling of feet, anything like that, because there is a thing to listen to. And so in the same way in radio studios and television studios, what lengths they go to pretend that they're not on the radio, not in the television studio, is fantastic. You're covered with soundproof walls, and somebody looks at a clock, and it's like countdown for a rocket going off, and says, "Stand by." Everybody has to be silent. And then he points at the main speaker. Go. And it would be a terrible faux pas for another television camera to be seen on the camera that is transmitting the signal. But I have wrestled with television stations and told them that this is an abomination, that we've got going television in the round, where there are cameras all round, so that we can have a group of discussion people sitting in a ring and doing all sorts of things, or we could have dances in which you would see the other cameras, but so what? Who cares? So likewise, when you're listening to the radio, although it's done in a perfectly silent studio, suddenly a truck goes by, or a jet plane goes over, or somebody burps, or you've got a crackling fire. So what's all this about eliminating exterior noise? Incidentally, if you've got any old records that have scratches on them and they make funny noises, just put them on and imagine that you're sitting in front of a fireplace. And the sound comes through quite clearly. It's no problem. So then, there was an extraordinary eccentric called John Cage. He was a good friend of mine. And he was a very competent musician. Oh, I mean, Juilliard and all that. He knew it all. And so he first of all experimented with opening up the piano and attaching paper clips, nails, and washers to the strings, so that they made very unusual noises. Then he played regular set pieces of various kinds, but with what he called a prepared piano. Then he got weirder. He decided that he would set up in a row 12 radios, and each one would have an operator. And according to a series of intervals derived from playing with the I Ching, they would turn the radios on and off, all arranged on different stations. And so you got this extraordinary babble. Then he got 8 Ampex tape recorders and recorded all kinds of funny sounds, the street sounds, people washing, airport sounds, any kind of funny stuff. And then he played them all at once. Well, then he got another idea, which was to get an enormous amount of miscellaneous noise and to play it in an art gallery where people were milling around and record the happening itself, the noise made by the audience in reaction to all the noise he had prepared originally. Then he played that back to them and re-recorded their reaction to it and then played that back. Then he had a real one. He gave a formal concert in New York. It was one of the important halls, Carnegie Hall or something. And he appeared, beautifully dressed in white tie and tails, and with an assistant to turn the pages of the score. Grand piano, everything formally set up. But the score consisted entirely of rests. And it had it had a key signature and repeat places where you turn the page back. And he sat down at the piano and waited through the proper time of the thing while the man turned the page. And the audience began to titter and shuffle and cough and sneeze. The point of the performance was, however, for the audience to listen to itself. He didn't explain this. But the word got around that that was the idea. Now, will you see what he was doing? He was drawing attention to soundscape. Just as landscape is the natural background of people and buildings and so on, so the background of music is soundscape, which is what I would call the susurrus of sound going on all over the place. Well, now, there's a certain importance to all this. And to understand it, we have to go to Chinese philosophy. The Chinese developed landscape long before we did. Oh, as early as 700 AD, at the very least, there were landscape painters in China. And as and when human figures appeared in landscape, they were very tiny. Because they always saw man in the context of nature. They did not see man as the ruler of nature, or as something independent of nature. They didn't see the organism except in relation to its environment. They had also a different concept of perspective. See, our convention of perspective is that things become smaller as they are far away from you. That is to say, less important. And there's a famous story about this. Well, several stories for that matter. A lot of people, when we show them a perspective drawing, who don't belong to our culture, they just don't comprehend it at all. But they say the tree there in the distance is not that small in relation to something in the foreground. They just don't see it. And once when a GI was visiting Picasso during the liberation of France, he said he could not understand his paintings. Why does you paint a person looking from the side and from the front at the same time? And Picasso said, do you have a girlfriend? He said, yes. Have you got a picture with you? He said, yes. He pulled out his wallet and showed a photograph of his girlfriend. And Picasso looked at it in astonishment and said, is she so small? So you realize, therefore, that what we think is art depends to an enormous extent on convention. Now, in Chinese painting, there are at least 2 vanishing points, as a rule. We'll take a full landscape painting, where the entire silk or paper is filled. And things that are distant tend to be not diminished towards a vanishing point in the center, but to be higher on the paper, and things close at the bottom. And so you get this convention of painting on a scroll. Now, also, the Chinese make full use of the paper. We tend not to, especially in our more conventional style. I don't think we have a conventional painting here, but the thing is that when you go into a motel, you will very often find that over your bed is a flower painting. And it will be a bunch of flowers smack in the middle of a white sheet. Now, this is very curious, because that renders the background null. It turns it into mere background. But a Chinese painter would never do that. If he drew a spray of bamboos on a rectangular surface, he would put them right over to one side. And then he would vitalize the empty space, because it would appear to you to be water or mist, not paper. He might bring that out with a few hints, just a single line, thin line indicating a wavelet, a ripple. Then at once that whole blank area is alive. He balances it against what is drawn, so it becomes yin to the yang. There was another Chinese painter who was a Zen monk. And the way he liked to paint was to drink lots of sake, wine. And when he was sufficiently drunk, he would dangle his hair in ink and then slosh it right down the strip of paper. Then he'd wash it out, his hair, I mean. Then in the morning, when he'd recovered from being drunk, he would take a long look at this squishel, and he'd do a Rorschach on it, and would at last see a landscape. And then he'd take his brush and just fill in a few necessary details. And immediately there was this magnificent landscape. Leonardo da Vinci did the same thing. He'd look at dirty old walls and watch them until his eidetic vision brought out an extremely vivid picture. And then all you'd have to do was to fill in the details. Like you do when you wake up in the morning sometimes, you have eidetic vision, and you're sleeping in a room where the walls are made of knotty pine, and you suddenly begin to see faces or beautiful nudes or something or other in the pattern of the wooden grain, and you bring it up. So, remember then, we go back to the principle that nobody knows just exactly how this happens. We do not know how to make something beautiful. As soon as we know, it becomes a cliche. For example, we've got techniques now for copying sculpture and jewelry and paintings that are incredible. And you can go to Brentano's or certain department stores, and you can buy the most astonishing reproductions of the greatest statuary in the world. But there's something wrong with it. You begin to see it everywhere. You remember years ago, somebody thought it a great game to use wrought iron to make fishes. Very formally outlined fish of wrought iron, see? And at first they were interesting. But then they began to sell them in the dime store. Only the ones in the dime store were somehow sleazy. You know what I mean? It's like the glaze on mugs that they sell at the supermarket. You know the difference between a mug made by a fine potter and those with the lead glaze on that they sell you in the supermarket. Something absolutely horrible about them, even though they've allowed the glaze to run and so on, and done what are supposed to be good aesthetic tricks. They just don't come off. And a lot of people are like that. You know, what we call plastic people. But then what is that makes a plastic person? The answer is that anything that that person says or does is going to be very highly predictable. No surprise. So it is the element of surprise somewhere, somehow, of not knowing how it's done, that is essential to beauty. All right then. If that is the case, we have to be very careful how we handle nature and ourselves. Because, you see, we are in a passionate state of wishing to predict it all. To make it, as they say, foolproof. But it should be obvious that if there are no fools, there is no fun. That is why fools used to be in great demand. A king would have a fool present at court. The jester was actually a very wise person, as fools often are extremely wise. And they see things that other people don't see, just the same as children do. Somebody completely naive, totally honest, about not caring for the morrow, and generally speaking, screwy, will say things that are exceedingly funny, and everybody absolutely breaks up. We used to play a game as kids. You had a little book, with a story in it. But every so often, a word was left out, and there was just a blank. Then we had an assortment of cards that were shuffled and passed around, and people in turns would take the first card that came and read it in while the other person was reading the story. He'd stop for a blank, and then he'd read a word. It was utterly disconnected. But everybody just broke up because of the incongruity of the fill-in. And so kids today, they'll turn on the television with no volume, see? And then they'll play a record. Maybe people talking and singing or something or other, and compare it with what's on the TV. It's the same principle. Recently, I had to visit someone who was insane and couldn't talk English anymore. This is talking nonsense. And I spent an hour with her, having an extremely sociable, pleasant conversation in which I simply talked nonsense back to her. And she was quite happy. You see, or people don't ordinarily like to do that. They're trying to correct the person in the state of insanity and see if they can't push them back into talking proper English. There's no need to do this. And what does music mean? Now we get together and make music. But it has no meaning. Except itself. Music is beautiful, like a flower, like a fern, like a cloud. And we like to look at it, just the same way as we like to look at a landscape. And so if you can listen to music, you can listen to soundscape, you can listen to just anything. And dig it. Now this is enormous fun, but it's not generally recognized. If you just close your eyes and listen to all the sound that's going on, and you stop naming it, see, you don't call it anything. You don't identify it, but you just listen to this buzz. It's fantastic. And you also make certain discoveries. To the eyes, the world appears rather static. To the ears, it's never static. It's always on the move. Now, using ears only to study what is going on, to study reality, is a very, very fascinating enterprise. There's a book about it, which is called Sound and Symbol, and the author rejoices in the name of Victor Zuckerkandl, published by Princeton University, and Sound and Symbol, where he uses music as a method of inquiry into the nature of the physical world. And it is an extremely interesting book, but he doesn't bring up the point which I'm going to make, which is that if you listen to the world, you will discover that there is no past and no future. They are absolutely inaudible. The past pop of a champagne cork is certainly not audible, nor is the future sound of the San Francisco earthquake. And also, you can't hear anybody listening. So if we are to believe our ears, there is no past and there's no future, and there's no difference between yourself and the sound you're hearing. It's all one. So there is a process going on, but nobody is being processed. There is just a process. That's you. See, when you listen, everything you hear is you. Or else there is no you at all. In that state of pure listening, without naming, you cannot tell the difference between the universe and your action upon it. That's kind of scary. Because when we experience the world simply as a happening, we're apt to say, well, hell, who's in charge around here? Because we always think somebody has to be in charge. I mean, doesn't somebody have to be in charge to make things go the right way? Or to make anything happen at all? I mean, don't you need a bit of a shove? Mustn't there be some primordial source of energy to goose the whole thing into being? No, it doesn't. All that is a military image of nature, where somebody's in command, based on the idea of a king, a general, commander-in-chief, who gives the orders and makes the original shove. Like, say, when you have a row of dominoes all standing up on end. Somebody flips the first domino and they go kata, 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 all the way down, and you have cause and effect. See? That's not the way nature works. But it's an image, it's a model, in terms of which we have been accustomed to think about nature. So that God, as conceived in the West, is the big boss, who is in charge, who orders all things. And then they got rid of God, around the 18th century. And people stopped believing in God, although they continue to think they ought to believe in God, but they don't really. So they got rid of the commander-in-chief and were left with the mechanical consequence of the commander-in-chief's operations. And so the universe was looked upon as a mechanism. And we talked of the mechanisms of nature and the mechanisms of the mind. And so now we all tend to regard ourselves and each other as machinery. And we want to make that machinery as predictable as possible. Because if you were a perfect psychologist, you see, you would always know what a person was going to do next. You would always know what was wrong with them when they were neurotic or psychotic, and you would be a mechanic, and you would just go in there with your wrenches and screwdrivers and straighten it out. And there would be no surprises left. So there would be no fools. There would be no crazy people. And you see, in this industrial society, we're terrified of crazy people. You can't have a crazy people driving automobiles. And you know, it's gone so far that whether you are or are not in a fit condition to drive an automobile is just about the definition of sanity. Well, now most people are not really fit to drive an automobile. Especially people who are angry or depressed, whose mind is not on the job because they're furious at their wives or in terror of their bosses. And just aren't thinking about anything except that, and they're going down the road. They're worse than drunks. You can't drive an automobile while profoundly in love with the girl sitting next to you. You're thinking about her. Her vibes are coming right across you. You know, you can't read poetry and drive an automobile at the same time. And what is this tyranny that's over us all? That we all have to be in a fit condition to go roaring down freeways in a death-dealing instrument. What's good for General Motors is good for America. So this industrial civilization is terribly tidy because it's so dangerous. If you're going to work on a production line, you know, this thing is going whizzing along. Well, you can't be foolish. Another thing about the freeway is that you must be going somewhere. You can't be purposeless on a freeway. You can't wander. You can't even wander in the suburbs. Because if you go out on foot and start wandering, the police car will come and say, "Where are you going?" And if you're not going anywhere, well, you're obviously suspicious. So you have to be walking a dog or jogging or doing something important. Otherwise, you're a deeply suspicious character. So, the passion to control everything, to predict everything, to square everything off, is destructive of life. When we get to the foolproof world, you see, and have no fools, there's no joke left. No jester. No joker. Because the joker in the deck of cards is your representative. It's the wild man who can play any other card. So the more predictable you are, the less you are of a joker. When everybody knows what you're going to do, you're an ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or a knave, maybe a queen or a king, but not the joker. The joker corresponds to the man whom in Hindu society would be called the Jivan Mukta, the one liberated, a sannyasin, a holy man. He's a joker. And when you meet real holy men, you cannot figure them out. They might do anything. They are often shocking people because they do things that holy men are not supposed to do. I mean, characters like Gurdjieff and even Sri Ramana Maharshi and so on are very, very unpredictable. They're weird, but always surprising. Zen masters, I know many. You never know what they're going to do next. Now, be careful, though. One warning. You cannot be artificially weird. There is no program for becoming spontaneous. A lot of people think there is, but what they do is this. They become only extremely conventional in an obverse way. That is to say, they do all those things which are not allowed by convention. And that is following convention, you see. Just its mirror image. So when we discuss spontaneity, or say in an encounter group of some kind, everybody is going to be spontaneous. Well, all they do is they become hostile, because hostile is bad form according to convention. And so we call it being genuine. Now, being an Englishman by origin, I have been brought up to preserve fairly good manners, be civil to people, not lose my temper, and so on. I feel perfectly comfortable with it. I don't have to flout those standards in order to feel real. But a lot of people tell me I'm not really there. We want to see the real you. Are you in touch with your real feelings, they'll say. And, well, of course I'm in touch with my real feelings. And I know that sometimes I'm furious, but I don't have to blow up at people. It's not necessary. Because one gets one's results much better by not blowing up, by being subtle. But beware of the phony spontaneity of merely going against what is conventional, because that is not the watercourse way. That is not the line of least resistance. And you have to be very sensitive to discover what that line is, to be able to flow.
This podcast was produced in conjunction with the Ramdas Be Here Now podcast network. Our theme music is by Zakir Hussain from The Rhythm Experience. And for further information on the recordings of Alan Watts, please visit alanwatts.org. Again, that's alanwatts.org. And thank you for listening today.
Think about a child you love. Now take away their clean clothes, access to water, and the...
Welcome to the Alan Watts podcast, Being in the Way. And I'm your host, Mark Watts. And today we're going to revisit one of our earliest podcasts and sample Taoist Way of Dropping Out from Karma, which is one of the first talks on Taoism that we ever released. And then we're going to complement that